What if the man who never died was shown things no human was meant to see? Not a vision, not a prophecy whispered in the dark, but the actual architecture of heaven, its courts, its orders, its deepest secrets. What if this man was hand-selected to witness something that shook the cosmos before it ever touched the earth? The defection of angels, the poisoning of humanity, a judgment already written before mankind had any say. And what if everything he recorded was later buried? Not because it was fabricated, but because it told too much of the truth. His name was Enoch, and his story is unlike any other in Scripture. Genesis gives him barely a handful of sentences, but those sentences carry enormous weight. He walked with God and then he was gone. No grave, no farewell, just absence. The kind of disappearance that doesn't have a natural explanation. The ancient Book of Enoch attempts to fill that silence. What it contains has disturbed religious authorities for centuries. Visions of angelic rebellion, forbidden knowledge passed down to humanity, a detailed portrait of heaven's inner structure, and a figure of divine salvation described so precisely that it seems to anticipate Jesus of Nazareth by hundreds of years. So why was this book cast out? What did it reveal that made early church leaders so uncomfortable? And why does it keep resurfacing, pulling at the threads of established faith? These are not small questions. They go to the heart of spiritual authority itself. Who decides which truths are permitted? Who draws the line between sacred and dangerous? And what happens when the things that were buried refuse to stay buried? Let's find out. Enoch. The man who bypassed death in a book filled with obituaries, names followed by lifespans, followed by the same two words, and he died. Enoch is the anomaly. Genesis 5 records generation after generation meeting the same end. And then it reaches Enoch and something shifts. He walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. No tomb, no mourning period, no body, just a man who was here and then wasn't. To the people who first read those words, this would have been startling. Death was the great equalizer, the one thing no patriarch escaped. And yet Enoch stepped clean out of that pattern. He wasn't buried, he was taken. His name itself carries meaning. Enoch suggests initiation, dedication. Someone brought into the inner circle of something larger than themselves. Not merely a follower, but a confidant. A man trusted with things kept hidden from others. But what was he trusted with? What did he see? The canonical scriptures leave those questions unanswered. The Book of Enoch does not. In those ancient pages, Enoch becomes something extraordinary, a scribe of heaven, a mediator between realms, a prophet of judgment who moved between the world of men and the courts of the divine. And the first thing his record addresses is not a vision of beauty or paradise. It is a catastrophe that began not on earth, but far above it. The Watchers. When heaven's guardians fell before the flood, before the chaos, there were the Watchers. These were not minor angels. According to the Book of Enoch, they were appointed specifically to oversee humanity, to guard, to guide, to observe. Their post was a privileged one, and they abandoned it. Led by a being named Samjaza, a group of Watchers descended to Mount Hermon and crossed a boundary heaven had established. They became entangled with human women, and from those unions came something that didn't belong in creation, the Nephilim. Scripture mentions them in Genesis, briefly and strangely, as if the text is circling something it can't quite bring itself to describe. The Book of Enoch describes them directly: massive, violent, insatiable, a hybrid existence that nature never intended. But the corruption didn't stop with the Nephilim. The fallen Watchers began transmitting knowledge that humanity was not equipped to handle. The forging of weapons, the art of war, enchantments, astrology, the reading of celestial signs. On the surface, some of these might sound like progress, but in Enoch's account, they are poisons dressed as gifts, power handed to beings who lacked the wisdom to carry it, and creation began to fracture under the weight. This mirrors Eden, the hunger for knowledge before readiness. The whisper says you can be like God, but Enoch's version is darker. In Eden, it was a serpent. Here, it was angels, beings who had stood in the presence of God, who had no excuse of ignorance, who knew exactly what they were doing. The result was a world careening toward annihilation, and Enoch, caught between two worlds, was pulled into the middle of it. The reluctant messenger here is one of the most striking details in the Book of Enoch. The fallen angels begged Enoch to intercede for them. Not a human seeking mercy from God. Angels, powerful, ancient, heavenly, appealing to a mortal man to carry their petition upward. Enoch went. He brought their plea before the divine throne. The answer was unambiguous. There would be no pardon. The Watchers would be bound in chains and cast into the abyss until the final judgment. The Nephilim would be destroyed, and the world they had corrupted would be cleansed, completely, catastrophically, by water. This reframes the story of Noah's flood entirely. It wasn't simply about human wickedness, though that was real and severe. It was about a spiritual contamination that had worked its way into the fabric of creation. A reset was necessary, not as punishment alone, but as preservation. Without it, whatever mankind was meant to become might have been lost entirely. Enoch carried the verdict. He was the voice of judgment delivered to those who had once been voices of heaven. The Son of Man, figure described before his time, then the visions expanded. And what Enoch saw next is perhaps the most theologically charged element of the entire text. Long before Bethlehem, long before Roman roads and fishing villages, and a carpenter's son in Galilee, Enoch describes a figure he calls the Son of Man. This figure is not born of earth. He exists in glory before creation. He is seated beside the Ancient of Days, the Eternal, the Supreme. He is called the Elect One, the Righteous One. He comes to render justice, salvation for those who sought truth, and reckoning for those who wielded power without it. He is elevated above every angelic rank, and he will return. Read those descriptions without context, and they are striking. Read them knowing they predate the Gospels by centuries, and they become almost impossible to explain away. The early church recognized what they were reading, and for some, that recognition created a problem. If the Messiah was described this clearly, this early, if heaven had known about him and announced him long before the incarnation, then the arrival of Jesus wasn't a response to human failure. It was a plan written before the world began. That is either deeply comforting or deeply unsettling, depending on what you need the story to be. Some theologians weren't ready for it, and so the text was pushed aside. The architecture of heaven, 10 realms beyond imagination. In the second book attributed to Enoch, the visions go further still. Enoch is escorted through 10 distinct heavens, each one a world of its own. Angelic choirs, rivers of fire, gardens that defy description, guardians of stars and keepers of time, beings whose sole purpose is to record every human soul with perfect accuracy. And at the highest realm, the 10th, the face of God, these aren't fever dreams. The Book of Enoch presents them as structured, ordered reality, a complete spiritual cosmology with layers and purposes and inhabitants, more vast and more organized than anything the canonical text explicitly describes. Paul mentions a third heaven in his letters. John's revelation offers glimpses of a throne surrounded by living creatures. But Enoch goes further than either of them, not contradicting scripture but expanding the frame, suggesting that what we call heaven is not a single destination but a living layered dominion of staggering complexity. For some readers, this was too much, too specific, too detailed, too far beyond what felt manageable. For others, it was exactly what they'd always suspected, that what lies beyond sight is not simple, but endlessly, gloriously deep. Authorship. Does it matter who held the pen? Scholars date the existing texts of the Book of Enoch to roughly 300–100 BC. This means it was compiled long after the Enoch of Genesis would have lived, assembled, most likely, by scribes who were preserving and organizing far older oral and written traditions. This became a reason for exclusion. Without a clean prophetic chain, without certainty about its origins, church authorities during a time of rampant heresy felt they couldn't risk it. But this argument doesn't hold up cleanly under scrutiny. The Psalms were written across centuries by multiple authors. Proverbs was compiled. The Pentateuch carries the fingerprints of many hands. The question of who held the pen has never been the final test of a text's spiritual weight. The Ethiopian church recognized this. They preserved the Book of Enoch, kept it in their canon, and continue to include it in their sacred texts to this day. So the question worth sitting with isn't who wrote it, it's why others worked so hard to make sure it disappeared. The real reason it was banned: fear. Not fear of falsehood. Fear of what happens when truth can't be contained within existing systems. The Book of Enoch described angels in ways that complicated tidy doctrine. It named a messianic figure before the Messiah arrived. It offered a vision of cosmic war and cosmic order that challenged the boundaries of what official religion was prepared to sanction, and it implied that God had been communicating enormous things long before any institution had the authority to approve those communications. That is a destabilizing text, not because it opposes Scripture. In many places it deepens it, but because it refuses to stay inside the lines that humans draw around the divine. Banning it wasn't just an editorial decision, it was a statement of power, a determination to control which truths the faithful were permitted to encounter. What we still might not be ready to see, there is something quietly arresting about the way Enoch's story ends. No battle, no prophecy shouted into a crowd, no dramatic final act. Just a man who walked so closely with God that one day heaven simply kept him. And maybe that's the thing that makes his writings so difficult to dismiss. Not that they're extreme, but that they're intimate. They read like the notes of someone who was actually there, in rooms we can't access, hearing conversations we weren't invited to. They describe a war that began before us, a mercy that was planned before creation, and a judgment that has always been coming. The Book of Enoch was meant to be remembered. If it was feared silenced and buried, then the question it leaves behind is a searching one. What are we still not willing to see? What revelations might be waiting for those who are willing to walk close enough and stay curious long enough to receive them? God is not threatened by hard questions, only by hearts that give up asking them. If this stirred something in you, share it. Subscribe for more explorations like this one, and leave a comment. Do you believe the Book of Enoch carries genuine divine truth? Should it have stayed in the Bible? The conversation is worth having. Until next time, walk steady, stay hungry for truth, and never stop looking beyond the veil.